Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer, and with me is Deb Romero, certified Alexander instructor. Today's topic is called I'm Just a Trail Rider, and we're going to talk about trail riding and balance and helping our horses and all of these things we look at from the inside out, exclusively in the context of pleasure riding. I'm just a trail rider. So, Deb, you want to get started with that? What comes, what do you encounter when you hear that phrase from somebody, I'm just a trail rider? What does that mean? Or what is somebody saying to you with that response?
Usually that comes with, they just seek it for the pleasure of it all, that they don't feel they have to think about balance or, whether the horse is, what happens before what happens. I always hear these stories. There's equestrian seniors on Facebook of all of these trail riders falling and getting hurt. And I keep asking myself, why is that? So
Yeah.
why is that happening so frequently? And I need to get a vest now because I don't heal as well as I used to. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're definitely missing something.
Yeah, if it's that prolific, if it seems to be a pretty common topic of conversation, either in trail riding groups, whether it's online or in person. But yeah, the main topic of conversation seems to be how to get control over your horse or how to protect yourself more from a fall, almost as if it's expected.
Yeah, you're right, like an expectation that something might happen.
Yeah, and when we take horses out on the trails, horses are sensitive to changes. They're prey animals, so they're highly stimulated by changes in the environment. They're, like we've talked about, their vision, they don't see details, but they're highly sensitive to movement. So things that are moving, and on a trail, there's a whole lot of things that are out of our control in the environment.
Yes.
And so that lack of control over the environment means the horse's sensitivity or alertness to potential danger is heightened. That's just the inherent nature of horses. They're going to be more heightened in unfamiliar environments, questioning if they're safe more often than not.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this in a previous podcast about how as predators, we have this innate thing that if a horse is getting uptight or going to spook at something, we try to push them towards it.
Yeah. Yes. And I don't know why that is, but it's perpetuated with other people in the group saying, like the kind of things I hear from trail riding, from clients who primarily ride for pleasure and love trail riding. And I was an avid trail rider. I loved going through the mountains in Colorado and California and rode trails a lot. I love trail riding. So I'm not bashing it because it's not competitive. Like, why else ride a horse except for the pleasure of it? But the I'm just a trail rider excuse that I hear from some people is often given with, I don't really need riding lessons. I'm just a trail rider. I don't really need to put my horse in training. I just need to solve this one problem. Or I just need a bigger bit, or I just need to push my horse through it. I just need X number of rides to expose my horse to trails until they calm down. And all of that is a little bit of a sink or swim mentality. And there's enough inherent challenges with a horse learning to cope with the weight and mass of a rider, no matter what you're doing, that challenges their balance, challenges their stability. And then if you put an unbalanced or unstable rider on a horse and head out into an unknown environment, shit's gonna happen. Like, and because that's so almost predictable, people are thinking in terms of, how do I cope with that fact rather than working to change that fact? That people just think it's an unchangeable reality, that they learn have to take more protective measures or use more leverage, or cope with it at best. Just kind of cope with it until the horse figures things out.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your view on around here? I see there's a lot of desensitizing clinics.
Oh, desensitizing. It makes people feel better.
Oh, it makes the human feel
better. It makes the human feel better. Yeah. But desensitizing, that whole concept, it goes back to what used to be called sacking out, or
right, I remember that.
or flooding a horse, right? It's the same now, we call it desensitization. But it's basically exposing a horse to a fearful object until they can make the shift that it's not fearful. The biggest flaws behind desensitization are, number one, horses have specific memories, and they relate more to energy than objects. So you can't desensitize a horse for every possible thing you're going to encounter. Like, there's just no predictability to what the world's going to throw at you on a trail ride. And there's no predictability to how the horse, that unique individual horse, is going to respond to anything new. Like, that's unique to the individual. So I go, it kind of makes people feel better to have pool noodles and plastic and things like that, and see that their horse doesn't have to react. But that lack of reaction can be because that horse just trusts their rider. And that's something you carry with you no matter where you go or what you encounter. Like, to me, it's a waste of time to desensitize horses in those kind of environments where you're just throwing a whole bunch of random foreign objects, and you're hoping at a certain point that the horse actually has the capacity to extrapolate that, because because a pool noodle wasn't scary, that a deer in the forest isn't scary. Like, that's really asking the horse to make a big mental leap.
No kidding.
And that's what I mean. You desensitize to whatever you come up with, but you're relying on that training, so to speak, for the horse to extrapolate it into the real world. And I go, they can't do that. It's specific. It's either horses are reacting based on instinct, habits, memories, or the current energy level of whatever's going on. Right.
I'm wondering about that, if we are, and it might be completely subconscious for the human to be thinking, oh, I have to prevent that spook. I have to, by using the energy that produces of fear or anxiety.
Oh, right. Right.
In the human.
So I was going to say, I didn't know if you meant the horse or the human.
The human, yeah.
But yeah, because as soon as a horse is triggered into their sympathetic nervous system, having a genuine fear response or defensive response, it takes a lot for the human to control their own fear reaction to the reaction of the horse. And that's why I think, the desensitization clinics, I go, they really kind of help people more than they help horses. It isn't going to make your horse trail worthy, because on the trail is a different context than pool noodles in the backyard. Those are very different environments from the horse's perspective. They don't translate one to the other, right? What does translate is if the human can sort of remain calm and focused, then the human can help the horse mostly by getting their eyes off of whatever is stimulating fear and defensiveness. And we've talked about that before. Rather than taking them towards it, what the horse really cares about is, does my human help me feel safe? No matter what else is going on, the horse only cares. Like that's the herd strategy of survival, is the lead horse is the one that helps the rest of the herd find safety. So if we think about it from the horse's perspective, pushing a horse towards fear or presenting things that create fear, I go, that just shows poor judgment. Like the horse is going, what are you thinking? Like that does not help me feel safe. That sucks, right? And so a horse's fear is going to be triggered. Like you can rely on that. They're going to question their environment because they're highly sensitive prey animals. So the way we get horses to be able to do more and more safely is that we help them overcome fear by restoring an internal feeling of safety. So whatever achieves that is what we need to do. Right? It's not a matter of X number of exposures and the horse figures it out. It's that every time the horse starts to show us that the sympathetic nervous system, fight and flight, is starting to escalate anxiety or tension or defensiveness or resistance, that we work with our horse in a way that helps them feel safe again.
Right.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
You know,
I've come into situations and it's, I think sometimes you really need, if you're a trail rider, finding that perfect group to ride with.
Oh yeah, there's nothing like a pack of humans in a herd of horses. That just goes sideways really fast. Yeah. Having people to ride with that are not looking at me and my horse from a human instinctual perspective. Because, somebody somewhere, their horse pops a cork and the horses are tuning into that energy. If one horse goes on high alert, all the other horses are put on alert to danger. And that's just a herd of horses. You can't get away from it. And that bond can be much stronger than the bond between the individual rider and the individual horse.
That's interesting.
So when you put your horse in a group, you really have to have quite a high level of trust from your horse with you for your guidance. And you have to have quite a high bond with your horse to override that herd instinct or to manage it. And so going out with a bunch of people with horses that feel unsafe with their riders is sort of an accident waiting to happen.
That's a good point. I'm wondering, if most trail riders think about, am I affecting my horse in a positive way or a not so positive way, balance wise? So if the horse is having to deal with somebody that's not balancing as best as they can, that's just one more thing that to put on the stack of what could happen.
Yeah, because we can look at trail riding and increasing safety, decreasing risk. That's like the number one priority for all trail riders. Increase safety, decrease risk while we're taking our horses either in a group or alone into unknown environments for fun, right? And I go, so the only way to keep it fun is to also feel safe. We have to feel safe and the horse has to feel safe. And then it is fun. It's a lot of fun, right? So it's when the horse doesn't feel safe or when we don't feel safe, that's when trail riding becomes unsafe in general, and can really create a chain reaction in a group.
Yes.
Right? So how do we feel safe? Well, let's look at how the horse feels safe. The horse feels safe by knowing that their human is a constant source, a constant provider of feeling safe and feeling comfortable. So if we don't have that at home, it's pretty hard to carry out on the trails.
That's a good point.
Right? Because if we don't have that in our day-to-day relationship in the best of environments, then when we add more stimulation, the stimulation is going to challenge what we have. It's not going to build what we have. It's going to tax it. Right? So it's like if you might need to build up your bank account of trust and the horse feeling safe in the best of environments in order to navigate and cope with challenging environments.
I guess it's kind of like a professional athlete doesn't just train in their sport. They're always cross training, and we've talked about that before, right, too. You don't just trail ride, you know, you need to have that basics at home where right, it's, you know, the odds are it's very safe and you can tackle balance problems there to yes, enjoy the trail ride.
Right. Right. And so in an easy environment, maybe with, and that's why people will take a green horse out with a seasoned horse on the trail, right, because the seasoned horse will offer some of that constant calmness and confidence to the horse that's less secure. And that seasoned horse is what we're supposed to be as riders.
I like that.
Right?
We're supposed to be the seasoned.
We're supposed to be the seasoned horse who doesn't react. That's what we provide to our horse no matter where we are. And so when we can stay calm and confident, then that energy can help the horse remain calm and confident. Yes. Right? So just a level of trust that the horse trusts the rider like the horse would trust a herd member or the seasoned horse. They trust it because they feel safe all the time. Right? It provides a sense of safety. And that's why that works. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is if a horse is either uncomfortable in their movement, or if the rider is unbalanced, maybe not paying attention, maybe has a posture of always sitting back too far, or always leaning forward too far. Instability can lead to a sense of not being safe. And we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah, that's important because most of the pictures I see are people are sitting on their pockets. So they're already, and they're completely, most of them are locking their legs straight out, you know, and sitting on their butt. So they're out of balance already.
Yes. Yeah, and most trail riders, at least the ones I work with, that usually start training either as riders or have their horses start training, is because now they're running into dangerous behavior more frequently. Right? So to turn that around, it's sort of a three-pronged thing we have to look at. We have to look at the trust level between the horse and rider. We have to look at sort of the stability and balance of the rider, because that weight and mass is going to have a direct influence over the horse's stability. So if the rider isn't helping the horse become more stable, then by default, we're making the horse unstable. So right, if we don't know, then our weight and mass is creating instability in the horse. So when we rely on the stirrups and we lean against the back of the saddle, or we need a big Western saddle, trail saddle, deep English saddle, just to feel safe, then we're putting our safety more into objects, relying on objects, than we are the relationship. And the real safety and fun is the relationship between the horse and rider, and how stable both bodies feel during motion. Right. So you don't need a high level of balance to trail ride, but you need essential mechanical function that allows stability and some self-carriage in the horse and in the rider in order to feel safe in new and challenging environments.
Yes.
And there were times on mountain trails where I had to just really stabilize myself and let my horse choose the way, because the footing was so challenging, either a really steep hill, or we're on rocks, or we're on a ledge. And the best thing I could do was stabilize myself, loosen up all of my guidance of the horse, and let the horse find the footing.
That brings back a memory when we lived in New Mexico. My husband would go elk hunting with our quarter horse, our mule, and a friend. And he told me one experience. They were just walking down a trail and somebody else's either mule or donkey was loose and it was running at them.
Yeah, you can't desensitize for stuff like that.
Do with that? Yes. And so luckily, my husband, being the loosey-goosey person, the big quarter horse just went, oh my God, and completely turned around and went the other direction. Yes. Running over everybody else. And our mule's standing there like, what's the problem? I don't see any problem.
Yes.
Yeah, but if he had made that horse try to stay there, that would not have been healthy.
No, because all that energy's got to go somewhere.
It does.
Yeah. And so trying to contain the horse, if he had enough leverage and enough desire to make his horse go towards this approaching danger, then the energy's got to go somewhere. Yeah. And usually it goes straight up, bucking, rearing, or that 180 or jumping sideways is the classic. Yeah. Right.
Oh, he couldn't jump sideways. This is a total 180, go the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the things, if we're relying on our stirrups or the back of the saddle or the reins for our primary stability, in a moment like that, you're not staying on. Everything just becomes way too unstable. Yes. So if you don't have your own sense of kind of equilibrium over gravity, it doesn't mean you have to be a great rider, but you have to know enough to manage your own body's stability on the force of motion in the best of times.
Yes.
And that's what keeps you on when you suddenly have a high level of force that's going in an unpredictable direction.
That's a nice physics way of explaining it.
And that's really all it is physics. And so the dangerous part of trail riding is if there's no internal ability to manage forces in our own body, or if the horse is either poorly managing the forces in their body or unstable, then any small thing could trigger a big reaction.
Good point. That, like the plastic bag.
Yeah.
On the ground.
Yes.
I've had a couple of instances like that. Oh yes. My God, the plastic bag.
Yeah. So when I hear I'm just a trail rider, a lot of times it's when I, give lectures or demos and I'm talking about balance in the mind, balance in the body, finding, essential healthy mechanical function by training the horses to move better for whatever the job is. And people will come up and say, well, I'm just a trail rider. I don't really need my horse to lift its back. I don't really need engagement of the hindquarters. I just ride for pleasure and we don't do anything too athletic. And but from the horse's perspective, carrying a live weight and mass is already an athletic endeavor.
Exactly.
And if the horse is afraid and unstable while we're seeking pleasure, then are we really kind? Like, are we really, is that kind to the horses?
Yeah. Are we taking into consideration, is the horse enjoying themselves?
Exactly. Because if we're not in it for our horses as much as ourselves, we may as well get a bike.
Cheaper.
It's a lot less expensive to learn mountain biking or to go hiking if you really want to go out on the trails. You could walk or ride a bike or get a golf cart or an ATV. But it's like, there's no reason if we choose a horse as a partner that we have to treat them like an ATV. They have thoughts, they have feelings, they experience emotions the same way we do. So if their body doesn't feel comfortable or stable, and if their mind is sort of heightened to danger, then is that really fun?
Yeah. And I wonder also if people actually feel or look at the horse's posture, because I truly believe if we're really in tune with what's going on in the moment, we're going to kind of feel what happens before what happens. We're going to get some sort of sign, whether the horse, raises its head and arches its back or starts blowing or,
right.
Just looking at the ears. If the ears are like honed forward at something, that to me is, I should be paying attention, because that's an alert to me.
Right. So the minimum requirement for helping our horses as pleasure riders or trail riders is, number one, that they feel safe during the activity.
Good point.
So that's number one. Number two is that they feel reasonably stable and comfortable within the work. So what those two things mean to me, because they're linked, is if the horse is dominant in the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system, then you're going to have a coordination of the body that is 100% guaranteed dysfunctional, because it's going to be instinctual and unstable, right? So if the horse feels unsafe, you have not only a risk to our safety, but now the horse is uncomfortable, not only not having fun, but possibly moving in the direction of having pain in the body. Okay. So you have both. So when the horse feels safe internally, the energy levels move towards calmness because of the flood of hormones and peptides in the body that are related to that parasympathetic nervous system of rest and digest. So we can read it through the energy. Right. We can just read it through the energy. So if our horse looks away and gets distracted, and we feel tension and anxiety, energy coupled with that, that's the moment our horse is telling us, I'm beginning to feel unsafe. That's the moment we need to redirect the attention or change what we're doing and help the horse restore a sense of safety and restore dominance of the rest and digest nervous system. Because if the horse is at least moving with an internal sense of safety and trust for the rider, then they're going to organize their body better. It might not be perfect, right, but it's going to be less damaging than if they're going down the trails in fear, in defensiveness, in the fight flight nervous system. So I go, that's the very least we can do to enhance our horse's comfort within the job, right? So there's a couple of things we can look at that are very reliable and very predictable. And it always makes me laugh because drivers always use a bridle with blinkers or blinders, right? The little, right? And a lot of racehorses, they use that too. Do. So why do humans use blinkers on horses? Sorry, just as you took a drink. Why
do they?
Yeah.
So they're not distracted?
Right. Why would we want to avoid distraction?
For our safety.
And how does that help us be safer? A distracted horse is what? More prone to reaction.
Yeah.
So
they're not present with us. They're like the deer in the headlight.
Right. So we use blinkers because it avoids the horse focusing on things that might stimulate a reaction.
Yeah.
It keeps them focused on the communication to the rider. So I go, right there is where we get confirmation that we don't take horses towards fear. We take them away from it if we want calmness and a sense of safety. That's why blinkers were invented, is because it keeps the horse from focusing on potential unsafe stimulus. Right? So without blinkers, one of the things I tell people is you can watch the ears.
Yes.
As soon as the horse's ears are pointed away from us, that's where the mind is gone. So a horse with blinkers on will typically have the ears halfway turned back, right? Or one ear turned back. You can kind of watch it. Sometimes the ears will be pointed forward to sort of see where they're going, but you're reducing the peripheral vision of the horse.
Right.
So they're not as reactive to things that are moving in the environment that might cause a fear reaction. That's why we use them. So on the trails, if we don't have blinkers, we do the same thing by just turning our horse's mental focus away from anything that's stimulating a fear response. Right? If they look to the right and the ears are pointed to the right and they're increasing tension and anxiety, then going more to the right works directly against the whole theory behind blinkers.
Yeah.
Right? So you wouldn't go to the right. You would go, my horse is looking to the right. The ears are pointing to the right, and I'm feeling tension and anxiety increase. So even without blinkers, you have invisible blinkers by turning left, and you take their mind off of it. So that could be a left turn. It could be a left circle. It could be a serpentine left and right. It could be just a niggle of the left rein, right? It just means take the attention away from the trigger and put it back on me, the rider, as the source of safety and trust, or at least something else, right? Something else that isn't creating the trigger. So the whole reason we use blinkers is because of that tendency that horses have in highly stimulating environments with a lot going on. So the least we can do for our horses on a trail is not take them towards the fear, take them away from it. And we can watch the ears to see where their mind is focused. We can feel the energy levels either increasing tension and anxiety or decreasing towards calmness. So those kind of things help us know if our horse feels safe internally or not. So simple. Right?
I had an experience yesterday with one of my horses. She kept actually going towards whatever was upsetting her and getting more and more and more upset.
Yeah.
But still going towards it. So I completely turned her away from it, saying, no, that is not the right answer.
Yeah. So that's the fight response. It's still fear. It's fear-based. But we and horses in a fight defensive response go towards the thing in question, ready to attack.
Yeah, that's finer things, of course.
And the flight response is directly opposite, away. Right? So I had this situation once in my own backyard. Again, spontaneous training opportunity. I had a guy move in next door and he backs up this U-Haul and unloads a pig and a bunch of chickens and one duck, right? So this is my new neighbor who backs up to where my horses were. And one of my little horse, the Arabian, who's 14 too, goes into high alert, runs towards the pig and presses her body against the fence. Like she's all in. What is it? I'm going to attack it.
Oh.
My 17 hand warm blood that I was on at the time starts literally backpedaling. Like head goes up, high anxiety, but absolutely moves the opposite way. That's a classic fight response and flight response.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, I hadn't really considered pigs as a desensitization, right? But there it was. So in
There's
that
moment,
right. So in that moment, I tried to redirect the horse I was riding. I tried to redirect his attention and all of that, but the smell was probably overwhelming. The sound was new.
Yes.
Oh, which brings up why we also use earplugs and blinkers. I go, those two tools are so common, right? So earplugs do the same thing. It reduces stimulus. Same as blinkers, reduces stimulus. Why do we have those tools at every tack shop in America? Because a reduction of stimulation helps horses stay calm. Right?
But
so
yeah, it's still a question, is the horse having a good time?
If they feel safe, I would say yes, they can have a good time. Then there's a question that's more long-term. Is it beneficial to their body? Or are they developing from discomfort into pain, into lameness issues? That's more of a long-term question as a trail rider or a pleasure rider. But the short-term question is, if that horse doesn't feel safe. So like the situation with the pig, I tried redirecting the horse I was on, getting his attention off of it, but there were other factors that were still overwhelming him. So with as much experience or riding I could stay on, that was an option. But when you start to think how my horse feels,
right,
I go, the best thing I could do for my horse in that moment was to get off and see if I could help him calm down. Right. And so I put him just on a lunge line and tried to get him to halt, tried to get him to listen to me. He spent a bunch of energy, but it still took some time for him to come down, because that unexpected event just really triggered his flight response and a high degree of fear. And we ended up having to work with the new neighbor, the pig.
Oh my gosh.
For several sessions to help that particular horse get over it. But you never know how they're going to respond. It's out of our control how any individual is going to respond. All we can do is read it and go, wow, my horse is not feeling safe. Maybe I'm not even sure why, but I need to get the horse's attention, maybe back on me or back on the job. And I need to bring that energy level down. I need to reduce tension. I need to reduce anxiety.
And I think it's a good point to remember that their senses that they use are much more heightened than ours. They don't see as well as we do, and sight is our main interpreter these days, whereas their hearing, sense of smell,
and sense of touch
are much more heightened.
Yes.
Because I know I have done it several times, like, and it comes out of my mouth. I'll say, well, what are you looking at? And then I have to go,
maybe they're not looking at all.
They're not looking.
Exactly.
They smell something or they hear something.
Or their level of skin sensitivity is higher than we can really imagine. And that's why we can say horses are sensitive to the energy. It's kind of like their sense of touch has all these little antennas that are sensing beyond their body. And so the energy that's around them can be what's stimulating them.
And I see that on a lot of posts on Facebook, because the human mind thinks about what happened in the past, the fear, the energy, that energy is already present in the human.
Yes.
When they get on.
Sometimes, yes.
And are they checking in to make sure that that is under control? What is that? What do I need to do about that?
Right.
Is the human thinking, do I feel safe?
Right.
Or am I just pushing through this? Because we've all been taught that. Oh, just
Well,
ride
and
through it.
as the higher intelligence, supposedly, we do have the brain capacity to consciously work through our own fears. And so it makes me a little nuts when I hear people go, oh, I just need to go get a different horse because I'm afraid and this horse isn't helping me.
Whoa.
Yeah, I go, whoa, same thing. It's like, it's not really the horse's job to help you feel more self-confident.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it's like, maybe a bike.
Maybe you can fall off that too.
Maybe a bike.
I've seen lots of body trauma from people on mountain bikes or cyclists on the road.
Well, and a good friend of mine who is an excellent cyclist, avid cyclist, he would say it's a whole nother deal to ride in a peloton, which is a group of cyclists. So even these guys or people who go out and ride in big groups, he said that is not that different from going out with a group as a trail rider.
I completely agree. I've had some clients that they've had severe injuries from cycling with a group. I mean, in the hospital for weeks with punctured lung and
yeah.
Yeah.
No, and my friend said when he first, got the really expensive bike, got really serious, was out practicing, he kept asking the bike shop owner, can I ride in your group? Can I ride with you guys? And he's like, oh no, you need thousands of hours before we let you into our group. And I thought that was so interesting that it's like a good group of riders, whether it's bicycles or horses, is going to be highly protective of what they have. Because they don't want that person who just doesn't have enough experience or just doesn't know how bad things could go or doesn't have enough control yet.
Good point.
Because letting that person in their group risks the safety of the entire group.
That is so true.
Yeah. And when I've been out on group trail rides, I only now go with people who I know understand how to help their horses. Because if you have one horse that doesn't trust the rider and is acting on instinct, it takes tons more of a foundation. Like you have to really have a super strong relationship with your horse to overcome your good horse reacting to the fearful horse. It's possible, but it takes a lot.
Yeah.
Most horses are going to react to a fearful horse. It's going to put every horse on alert because that's one of their survival mechanisms. So I thought it was fascinating that even serious cyclists aren't going to let just any newbie into their group.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we ride with other trail riders, we need to be selective about who we ride with, and help other people rather than thinking, the biggest badass rider who can ride the horse that's out of control is our leader. I go, that is not horse logic. That might be human logic, but it's not horse logic, right? Because the fear energy really triggers the prey animal survival mechanism.
Yes.
Right? For us, there can be a little bit of ego involved in riding a dangerous horse, right? And so that rider may be having a good time, but if the horse is in fear, even if that rider stays on that horse, it doesn't mean your horse isn't going to react, and you better be prepared for whatever your horse throws at you as a reaction to the horse that's not in your control.
And that's what all that work you were talking about that needs to be done at home, and the balancing of horse and rider plays a big part in falling off or not falling off.
Right.
Or actually choosing a dismount instead of the opposite.
Right. No,
So,
and for people who really are committed to just being a trail rider, I go, here's a few minimal tips. If you never want to work in an arena and you really don't want to take lessons or help train your horse, then the few minimal things you can do to make your life better is watch your horse's ears.
mm,
Redirect your horse away from what's causing fear towards something that's safe. Watch your horse's neck. When the neck is getting short and tight, then you're also, it can be from instability more than fear, but it's still going to trigger instinctual use of the body. It's still going to trigger the fight or flight nervous system, which is useful for the purpose of fight, flight, get away from fear, but it's also a temporary fix for instability.
yes.
Right? So if the horse isn't feeling stable, the neck will always shorten and tighten. Now, it can get high and shorten and tighten, or they can over curl it forward, short and tight, right? But either way, when the neck shortens, the horse's head is moving back towards the torso. Whether it's sort of the back of the head, like a high-headed horse is pushing the back of the skull towards the back, and a low-headed horse with an over-curled neck is kind of pushing the nose or the front of the skull back towards the chest. So either way, when the muscles of the neck are shortening, your horse, you're pretty much moving into the wrong nervous system, the fight, flight, sympathetic nervous system for stability or to deal with fear, one or the other. But the nervous system is important because it affects every single function in the body.
Yes.
Every single function.
Same with people.
Right. And so just knowing the difference between the fight flight nervous system, the rest digest nervous system, you increase your odds of safety, you decrease your odds of injury, and it becomes more enjoyable for you and the horse. So watching the ears and watching the neck, if the ears are pricked away and the neck is getting shorter, that's a sure sign, right? And this sort of takes away, what kind of saddle do you ride in? What kind of bit do you use? All of that. It doesn't matter. And this is where using a leveraged bit for control, you kind of have to be careful because it can cause a lot of horses to over curl the neck and shorten it, or it can be uncomfortable enough for horses that they elevate the head trying to get away from the pressure of a leverage bit. So the leverage on the trails, having a big shank bit, yeah, it's leverage, which might get the horse shut down, or it could escalate the problem. It could just escalate the problem, right? So leverage is a two-edged sword. You really have to watch how the horse responds to it to know if it's useful or not useful. So when the horse is going into the rest and digest or the parasympathetic nervous system, again, which affects every function of the body, the ears will get soft. At least one ear will keep coming back to the rider, if not both. And it's not a pinned ears, but it's just a turning of the ears. So the pointy tips of the ears are turning outward or back towards us. Right? So the horse is focused on communicating with the rider rather than looking at the environment, and a spontaneous lengthening of the neck muscles. Right? It doesn't matter if they're long and level, long and low, long and lifted. It's that spontaneous lengthening of the neck, taking the skull away from the horse's back and chest, that tells us they feel stable enough in their back and hindquarters that they can relax the neck, or they feel safe enough that all of that tension related to fight and flight is just the muscles are restoring to suppleness. Right? So where the ears are pointed and how the horse is choosing to use the neck. So as pleasure riders, if we don't want collection, we have no need to mess around with anything other than a snaffle, really. But if the leverage makes you feel better, use the leverage, is what I tell people. If the big saddle that keeps you in there makes you feel safer, then use the saddle. But but you can really watch, and you can even, trail riders can play with their own balance, a sense of standing over the horse rather than sitting against the back of the saddle will have a dynamic effect on the horse, and the horse will respond.
Yes.
So we can even play with our own balance and body use, watching the horse's ears, watching how the horse chooses to use the neck as feedback for how we're using ourselves during the trail ride is either helping our horse or kind of working against our horse's stability or sense of safety. So I go the ears and the neck. That's constant communication from the horse.
And that's something we can see. So that's important to the human, that's something we can key into.
And it's physiological. So this is really interesting. If we're using so much bit leverage, whether it's a snaffle with tight reins or a bit with big shanks on loose reins, it's like if our use of the bit and the reins, or even a bitless halter, bridle, whatever, if that is causing the horse to shorten the neck, we still trigger the fight flight nervous system because we're keeping the neck short.
We're putting them in fight flight.
Yes. So we can actually be the cause by what bit we use or how we use a bit and how we use the reins. We can perpetuate or put them in the wrong nervous system just because we're restricting the neck. We're not allowing it to lengthen.
That backwards pull. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like if we're in, if physiologically, if we put ourselves in a posture of fear, which I think in Alexander work, you guys call startle.
It's startle. Yeah.
Right. So startle is what does the back do, and what's the posture?
It's kind of the same thing a horse does. You're arching your back and your eyes are wide open. You may not be breathing. That's startle.
Usually the back of the head goes towards the back. Yeah. And that posture, if we walk around in that posture, we can start to feel fearful.
Yeah, and it's the same response. It goes right to our central nervous system, and the central nervous system says, I'm not safe.
Right.
And then usually fear comes up, or the fear of falling comes up. So it's very, just like horses. If we're not using ourselves well, our central nervous system is going to send us a message.
Exactly. And that's how the nervous system works. So if we're creating a posture in ourselves or our horses that's sort of that startle or fear-based posture, we trigger the nervous system to go into fight and flight, which is systemic throughout the body. And so it doesn't matter if the origin is instability, an external trigger, or an internal memory of fear. Like none of that matters.
Right.
Right. Physically, if we let the mind wander towards fear, right, which is for the horse, it's the ears pointing.
Yes.
Coupled with a short neck. That's the first sign, right? And if we don't turn it around there, it's most likely going to escalate.
I agree.
And sort of being passive and hoping your horse figures out it's okay. I go, all you're doing is taking a gamble. You're gambling. And so you better be prepared to ride what the horse throws at you if you leave that choice to the horse.
Yep.
You're on for the ride.
Or not.
Right? Or not. Get the blow up vest. Yeah. If we notice that our horse is sort of going that direction with a short neck and the ears pricked away and the energy level kind of escalating, we actually need to be actively redirecting
I agree.
attention, the posture, the stability. We have to redirect somehow if we don't want to just have to ride whatever the horse chooses to do.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's being a good leader, and that horse needs that from us.
Right. Absolutely. And there's a couple of classic things I hear from trail riders that tell me in the question itself that your horse doesn't see you as the provider of safety. And so what do you think those things might be?
I don't know. I know our posture affects it, or our energy level, whatever is going through our body. I know a lot of people that talk really loud to their horses.
Which is fine if the horse responds to that by becoming calm and secure.
Right.
Right.
But I don't usually see that. Usually the horse goes into a little bit of a startle and the head comes up. And
yes. But there's classic problems, horse problems, that people will ask me about a lot. And it's like people want to know, how do I get my horse to be less barn sour? My horse is barn sour. My horse is buddy sour. My horse can't go out by itself. My horse can't go out with its buddy, and they want to know, how do I fix my horse? But what those issues tell me is your horse doesn't perceive you as the provider of safety.
Exactly.
Your horse sees the barn as the safe place, not you. Your horse sees that other horse as the provider of safety, not you. Right? Your horse sees whatever as the provider of safety. And if the horse doesn't see the rider as the provider of safety, then in the horse's mind, it's the rider's job to keep up. So it's a highly stressful place for a horse, because the horse, if the rider isn't the provider of safety, then the horse has to become its own provider of safety.
Yes.
So what that means is the horse gives the rider no attention and starts to scan the environment for potential unsafe situations.
Yep.
And the horse doesn't listen to the rider's guidance, because in the horse's mind, it's the rider's job to keep up with the provider of safety. Right? Mm-hmm. So if we're not actively helping the horse feel safe, and the horse becomes buddy sour, barn sour, won't listen to the aids, won't redirect the attention, it's because the horse didn't vote for you, period. Right? The horse doesn't believe that you're the capable one in your little herd of two. So if you're not capable, then you become the follower.
Yep.
And that's just horse logic. So the horse is protecting you, going, hang on, we got to get out of here. Kind of like that quarter horse doing a 180, right? Didn't check in with the rider, just said, let's go.
We're out of here.
You either stay on or keep up, which is what the herd does, keep up, or you get eaten.
Yep. That's about it.
Yep. Yeah. So when we kind of look at trail riding from the horse's perspective, and we put ourselves in our horse's shoes, you start to understand what the horse is telling you in any given situation.
Yes.
With or without desensitization. The eye roll. It's like,
sorry.
Yeah. And some of these desensitization things I see, it's like the first objective is to create all this fear and then overcome it.
Exactly. I think that's the struggle I have with it.
I know.
I don't need to put my horse in that situation, is what I feel.
Right. Life's going to give you enough opportunities to deal with fear in your horse. It's like, you don't have to go looking for it. It'll find you. So yeah, to create fear. And I see a lot of trainers do that in demos. It's like, a fearful horse looks impressive. It's a lot of power, right? So it kind of makes trainers look better. to cause fear in the horse, to make everything more dramatic, and then show their fabulous magical training by getting the horse through to the other side. And I go, there's really no need to cause the fear in the first place.
Exactly.
But it does
I can't imagine what that does to their cortisol levels and,
oh yeah, it's
all
not
that.
healthy.
I mean, causing ulcers or all sorts of things.
Right. But it's interesting. I even look at like our news media and I go, that's what news is doing to humans, is just triggering the fear instinct over and over and over. And so it seems logical to humans to sort of heighten fear and then overcome it as a way to progress. But it makes no sense to horses who
to do that.
Yeah. We have much more complex brains.
Yes.
And horses in their simplicity just want to feel safe. If they feel safe with their human, they have no reason to act against the rider.
Exactly.
There's no reason. But if they have a reason, it's because the rider isn't helping them feel safe.
Yep.
And long term, if the rider hasn't had lessons on how to balance the body, then most likely most humans are kind of staying on a horse instinctually, which is not balance. It usually involves gripping and bracing.
Yes.
So that they don't fall off, but that can have an effect on the horse's movement that over time can destabilize the horse's body.
Yes.
And if it doesn't lead to so much instability that the horse feels unsafe, it can still lead to enough dysfunction that you end up with health issues or lameness issues.
Yes.
So the I'm just a trail rider isn't an excuse in my book not to learn about your horse, not to help your horse. I go, if you're not interested in learning how to manage your own body or help your horse in a healthy way that makes the ride enjoyable for them, then you're better off with a bike.
Yeah.
Park it in the garage, ride it once a year, have a great time. Right? But you don't get to do that with a horse. You can't park them in the barn, pull them out for your annual trail ride and hope things go well.
No, it does not work. It
doesn't work that way. Anything else you want to add? And I know you've been active in some of these trail riding groups. And so what have you learned from the trail riding groups, or is there anything to add to what we've been talking about?
No, I think we covered it all. I think our energy, what we bring to the equation, is really important. Where are we coming from? Even, catching the horse, what do we think about that?
Yeah. So it's that energy. Are we always building trust, or are we taxing the trust?
Yeah.
Right. So like punishment is a great way to make a horse defensive and not trust you. Right. Punishment, obedience, submission, those are great ways to break down trust from the horse to you. And the other thing that makes me laugh too, because we talked about blinkers and earplugs and leverage, and that is just riding around my own property with neighbors on either side and a normal, not a super busy street, but just a normal neighborhood where my horses are. It's like we try to control the environment and we get mad at the neighbors when they pull out the weed whacker or the mower or the chainsaw, or they're suddenly cutting down trees, or they're having a birthday party and there's kids on skateboards. And I go, all of that is your spontaneous training opportunity.
Yes.
I go, if you want to work on desensitization, just let the neighbors rip, let them do their thing and don't try to control it.
Yep.
And you can have your own desensitization clinic anytime. But I go, trying to control the neighbors or trying to control other riders in the arena or trying to control that you have the arena all to yourself. It's like those are the opposite of preparing your horse for trail riding or going to shows.
Yep.
So we can just let all that stimulation in the environment come to us and redirect our horse's attention, watch how they use the neck, and keep building trust by helping them feel safe.
Yep.
So I think that's it on trail riding. We'll wrap it up. I think we even went a little bit long today. So,
Good.
but it's something I hear a lot as an excuse to not learn about the horse. And I go, if you're not willing to learn about your horse, what's important to them, what their needs are regarding safety and comfort, then try a bike. Go for a nice spin in the golf cart.
Yep.
Have a good time.
I agree.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us for another Horse Geeks podcast. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Please like, share, subscribe. And I always forget to say at the beginning, thank you to all the new subscribers, and the commenters. We really love that. And thanks so much for joining us each and every podcast. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.